Welcome to the last module of Unit 3. Today we're going to talk about evolutionary psychology. Behavioral geneticists explore the genetic and environmental roots of human differences. Evolutionary psychologists focus mostly on what makes us so much alike. They use Charles Darwin's principles of natural selection to understand roots of behavior and mental processes. You can take a look at the learning objectives and pause if you need to go over those. And I'm going to continue. So today we're going to talk about, definitions of some basic vocab that you need, and then I'll talk about our first experiment. So evolutionary psychology is the study of the evolution of behavior and the mind, and it uses principles of natural selection and Darwin's theory of evolution, of course. Natural selection, on the other hand, is arguably, according to your text, one of the most momentous ideas to ever occur to the human mind, this idea of being able to understand and manipulate this. Natural selection is the principle that among the range of inherited trait variations, those contributing to reproduction and survival will most likely be passed on to succeeding generations. However, today we're going to look at an experiment where somebody else decides what sort of genetic traits they want to pass along, and they manipulate natural selection. So a fox, you're probably wondering, okay, with regards to all of this stuff, why is there a fox on my screen? And that is our transition into our very first experiments in Module 15. So a fox is a really wild and wary animal, ancestrally anyway, and if you capture a fox and you try to befriend it, you better be careful, because if you stick your hand in a cage, and if the timid fox can't flee, it just might bite you. A Russian scientist, Dmitry Balyav, wondered how our human ancestors had domesticated dogs from their equally wild wolf forebears. So he decided, in a short period of time, would he be able to accomplish a similar feat by transforming a fox into something friendly. So to find out, Balyav set off to work. 30 male and 100 female foxes, which by the way are called vixens. From their offspring, he selected and mated the tamest 5% of the males and 20% of the vixen females. He measured tameness by the foxes' responses to attempts to feed, handle, and stroke them. Over more than 30 generations of fox, Belyaev and his successor, Ludmila Trut, who by the way is still alive in her 80s and continuing on with this experiment, repeated that simple procedure. 40 years and 45,000 foxes later, they had a new breed of foxes that, in Trut's, the lady who's still running the experiment, in her words, they're docile, eager to please, and unmistakably domesticated. So just a little bit more about this experiment, because I found it kind of interesting. He starts off with this black silver fox. Unfortunately, for those that he doesn't deem exhibiting tame traits, he actually harvests them for fur. So, oh my goodness, 40,000 of those 45,000 foxes end up as fur coats. Joseph Stalin really hated this experiment, and so he had to, Belyaev had to say that he was doing this to develop really pure furs instead of what he was doing. And this is part of the experiment that continues on to this day. And so I wanted you to just watch and see how dog-like these fox behavior has become. So this is kind of interesting, right? So this is a continuation of that experiment. Well, what he found is that in a fairly short period of time, he was able to select traits that he wanted and selectively breed a breed of foxes that were now domesticated. So, of course, the same thing happened in the natural world with dogs who evolved thousands of years ago from wolves, and cats all the domesticated cats apparently have ancestral roots to this wild cat from the Middle East. I've heard before this reed cat from Egypt actually, but the Middle East in general are the ancestral relatives to all of your cats that are in your house. So if you have a dog or a cat sitting next to you today, evolutionary psychology is kind of connected to that today. Evolutionary success helps explain similarities. So although our person-to-person differences grab our attention a lot of the times, we humans are also strikingly alike. As brothers and sisters in one great human family, we all wake, we sleep, we think, we speak, we hunger, we thirst, we smile when happy, and favor what's familiar more than what is foreign. We return favors, we fear snakes, we grieve death, and as social animals, we have a need to belong. Evolutionary psychologist Steven Pinker has noted that it is no wonder our emotions, drives, and reasoning have a common logic across cultures. Our shared human traits were shaped by natural selection acting over courses of generations. Across our cultural differences, we even share a universal moral kind of grammar, notes evolutionary psychologist Mark Hauser. Men and women, young and old, liberal and conservative, living in Sydney or in Seoul, all respond negatively when asked, if a lethal gas is leaking into a vent and is headed toward a room with 7 people, is it okay to push someone into the vent, kind of blocking off and saving the 7 by killing 1? They all respond more approvingly when asked if it's okay to allow someone to fall into the vent, again sacrificing 1 life but saving 7. Our shared moral instincts survive from a distant past where we lived in small groups in which direct harm doing was punished. For all such universal human tendencies, from our intense need to give parental care to our shared fears and lusts, evolutionary theory proposes a one-stop shopping explanation. Darwin's theory of evolution has been an organizing principle for biology for a very long time. Jared Diamond, who, by the way, is somebody I really enjoy, he wrote Gun, Germs, and Steel. Anyway, he, in 2001, noted that virtually no contemporary scientists believe that Darwin was basically wrong. They don't. He is just accepted as generally right now. Today, Darwin's theory lives on in the second Darwinian revolution, the application of evolutionary principles to psychology. In concluding on the origin of species, Darwin anticipated this, foreseeing open fields for far more important researches. Psychology will be based on a new foundation. There are a few ways that our genetic traits that helped our ancestors to survive actually may harm us today, and here's that quick explanation. We are predisposed to behave in ways that promoted our ancestors surviving and reproducing. It's just the way things worked. But in some ways, we are biologically prepared for a world that no longer really exists. We love the taste of sweets and fats, which prepared our ancestors to survive famines, and we heed their call from school cafeterias, fast food outlets, and vending machines. With famine now rare in Western cultures, obesity is truly a growing problem. Our natural predispositions, rooted in deep in history, are now mismatched with today's junk food environment, for example, and today's threats to things such as climate change. So it's something we need to think about. An evolutionary explanation of human sexuality. So we face many similar challenges throughout history, and men and women have adapted in lots of similar ways. Whether male or female, we eat the same foods, we avoid the same predators, and we perceive, learn, and remember similarly. It is only in those domains where we have faced differing adaptive challenges, most obviously in behaviors related to reproduction, that we differ, and we differ greatly. So gender differences in sexuality. Consider men and women's sex drives. Who, for example, thinks more about sex, masturbates more often, initiates more sex, views more pornography? The answer worldwide to all of those questions is men, 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 and men. Sorry, guys. No surprise then, in one BBC survey of more than 200,000 people in 53 nations, men everywhere more strongly agreed that I have a strong sex drive, and it doesn't take much to get me sexually excited. Indeed, with few exceptions, anywhere in the world, reported cross-cultural psychologist Marshall Segal and his colleagues, males are more likely than females to initiate sexual activity. Men also have a lower threshold for perceiving warm responses as a sexual kind of come on. In study after study, men more than women attribute a woman's friendliness to sexual interest, even though it might not imply that from the woman's perspective. Misattributing women's cordiality, or just friendliness, as a come-on helps explain but does not excuse men's greater sexual assertiveness at times. The unfortunate results can range from sexual harassment to even date rape. Okay, when we start talking about differing preferences in partners, keep in mind evolutionary psychology is making generalizations based upon studies. It doesn't imply that this is everybody's preference, okay? Evolutionary psychologists use natural selection to explain why worldwide women's approach to sex is usually more rational and men's more recreational. The explanation goes like this. While a woman usually incubates and nurses one infant at a time, a man can spread his genes through other females more quickly. Our natural yearnings are our gene's way of reproducing itself. And so, what do many heterosexual men and women find attractive in a mate? Some desired traits, such as a woman's youthful appearance, cross place and time. Evolutionary psychologists say that men who are drawn to healthy, fertile-appearing women who have smooth skin, a youthful shape, suggesting many childbearing years to come, stood a better chance of sending their genes into the future. And sure enough, men feel most attracted to women whose waists, thanks to their genes or their surgeons, are roughly a third narrower than their hips, which is a sign of future fertility. Moreover, just as evolutionary psychology predicts men are most attracted to women whose ages in the ancestral past, when ovulation began later than today, would be associated with peak fertility, so teen boys are most excited by women several years older than themselves. Sorry again, these are just research. Mid-20s men prefer women around their own age, and older men prefer younger women. This pattern consistently appears across European singles ads, Indian marital ads, and marriage records from North and South America, Africa, the Philippines, anyway, around the world. Women, on the other hand, in turn, prefer stick-around dads over people who don't. So they're attracted to men who seem mature, dominant, bold, more affluent, meaning stable, not necessarily about the financial piece, but just appearing stable, with a potential for long-term mating and investment in their joint offspring. In one study of hundreds of Welsh pedestrians, men rated a woman as equally attractive whether pictured at a wheel of a humble Ford Fiesta or a swanky Bentley. Women, however, found a man more attractive if he was in a luxury car. In another experiment, women skillfully discerned which men most liked looking at baby pictures, and they rated those men higher as potential long-term mates. From an evolutionary perspective, such attributes mean that a man's capacity to support and protect a family is very important to women. Again, those are generalizations. So there's a principle at work here, says evolutionary psychologists. Nature selects behaviors that increase the likelihood of sending one's genes into the future. As mobile gene machines, we are designed to prefer whatever worked for our ancestors in their environment. Read this.